Chapter 74 Solace at the Temple. Gojo woke up, the room bright with morning sun. He looked over at Geto. He was staring up at the ceiling, and Gojo could see him slowly drawing in the dark shadows of energy that surrounded him. Gojo sat up and touched a hand to Geto's forehead and smoothed out his hair. "Why didn't you wake me?" "I didn't want to bother you. I was fine," Geto answered in a weary voice. Had he been battling his cursed energy all night? Gojo's eyes scanned the dark circles under Geto's eyes. His cheeks were hollow and his lips pale. "Suguru, if you're tired, it's only going to make it harder for you to control." Geto sighed. "Why don't you get some sleep and I'll make sure you're okay," Gojo suggested. "I don't want to sleep right now. I want coffee." Geto pouted and crossed his arms over his chest. A small puff of cursed energy escaped, and Geto absorbed it quickly. Gojo laughed softly and placed a hand on Geto's chest, the current strong under his palm. "I'll get you coffee, brat, if it stops you from being cranky." He went over to the fridge where they kept instant coffee packets and warmed some hot water in the electric kettle. Geto was trying to seem easygoing, but Gojo watched him sit up and waver, just a bit. He looked exhausted. Gojo brought him the steaming mug of coffee, then checked the time on his phone. "When you're done, get dressed. I think I know where to take you." Gojo touched his fingers gently to Geto's cheek on the way to the shower. They held hands as they walked, the autumn colors of their surroundings passing by in a blur. Geto didn't ask where they were going, but Gojo knew he'd figure it out before long. "Suguru, what do they say?" Gojo asked after a while. "Who?" "The voices," Gojo answered. Geto didn't want to talk about it. The voices touched on his deepest fears and insecurities, his greatest weakness. "You won't tell me?" Gojo tugged at his hand gently. "They tell me," Geto swallowed hard. "They tell me that I'm a burden." Gojo's face fell and he shook his head. "They tell me that I'm not good enough for you." Geto's voice trembled a little. "That's not," Gojo started to say. "They ask me if I really think you can save me. They tell me that you're going to leave me in the end, and I'll no longer be yours." Geto choked up and stopped in his tracks, dropping Gojo's hand to cover his face. Gojo brought Geto's hands away from his cheeks and held them. He touched his forehead to Geto's. "Suguru, none of that is true. Curses lie and deceive. You know this. They're preying on your deepest fears." Gojo wrapped his arms around Geto's neck, pressing their faces together. "Now you know my deepest fears," Geto said softly. Gojo kissed him gently and grasped Geto's hand again. They continued walking quietly, fingers entwined, both lost in their thoughts. As they approached their destination, Geto glanced over at Gojo. "The voices are quiet," Geto said. "I thought this would help." Gojo squeezed his hand and led Geto onto the temple grounds. Priests in their black robes drifted back and forth across the wide temple entrance. The smell of incense was strong as it hung in the still air. They went to the tiny garden again and sat on the bench. Gojo watched Geto as his body visibly relaxed. Temples were peaceful areas and were usually devoid of cursed spirits. With nothing for Geto's cursed energy to react to, Gojo knew he'd be able to find some solace. "Someday soon, maybe we can go to one of the services," Gojo suggested. Geto looked over at him and smiled. "I'd really like that." The air was cool and still. The sun streaming through the trees overhead warmed them. Geto leaned on Gojo's shoulder. Gojo mulled over how hard it would be to have someone in his head constantly telling him terrible things. It saddened him that Geto carried it alone. Geto didn't say, "I love you," a lot, but Gojo knew that he did. If Geto's biggest fear was him leaving, Gojo couldn't imagine living a day without Geto. His whole purpose in life now was to keep them together, create a life where they would never be apart. Those voices in Geto's head were wrong. He was the strongest. He'd always be able to save him, and he wasn't going anywhere. Anywhere he belonged was with Geto. Gojo looked over at his lover leaning on his shoulder. His eyes were closed. His breathing was slow and even. He was finally asleep.